The message came from the stars on a Tuesday morning, when Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee in the command center of the lunar base. The radio signal was clear and deliberate, carrying patterns that could only mean one thing: someone out there wanted to talk. Jake set down his mug and called his senior officers to the briefing room within minutes. Commander Lisa Bennett arrived first, her tablet already displaying preliminary analysis of the transmission. Lieutenant Ben Hayes came next, his tactical mind already running through scenarios. Dr. Amy Sullivan and engineer Kyle Rogers completed the team, and they all gathered around the holographic display showing the decoded message. The Galactic Council had been watching Earth for 3 years before deciding humans were ready for contact. Their message was formal and careful, explaining that they represented 7 peaceful species who had maintained harmony across 12 sectors of space for thousands of years. They invited Earth to send representatives to Station Harmony, a diplomatic hub located in neutral space, exactly halfway between Earth and the nearest Council world. The invitation was clear about 3 important points: come alone, come unarmed, and come in peace. They wanted to assess whether humanity could join their civilization without causing problems. Jake read the message 3 times before speaking. He was a career military officer with 20 years of experience, chosen for this mission because of his calm personality and his skill at handling difficult situations during the Mars conflict. He looked at his team and saw the same mixture of excitement and concern on their faces. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries, but it also carried enormous responsibility. Everything they did would determine Earth's future among the stars. Lisa pulled up information about the Council species that had been included in the transmission. She studied the biological data carefully, making notes as she spoke. The Xanthari breathed methane and lived about 60 years on average. The Krell were based on silicon rather than carbon and moved very slowly, but possessed incredible intelligence. The Voshan were pack creatures who never traveled alone. Every species on the Council had evolved on worlds with lower gravity than Earth, and none of them were predators at the top of their food chains. Lisa pointed out that this might be significant, though she was not sure how yet. Ben leaned back in his chair and brought up the tactical concerns immediately. The Council had asked them to come unarmed, and that presented a serious problem for any military officer. Jake agreed, but said they would follow the spirit of the request while being smart about it. No plasma weapons, no missiles, no obvious military equipment. However, he was not going to take his crew into unknown territory without any way to protect themselves if something went wrong. The team discussed options for an hour before reaching a compromise that satisfied both the diplomatic requirements and their safety concerns. Amy raised another important point about medical protocols. They had no information about diseases they might encounter or potentially transmit to alien species. She recommended full environmental suits for the delegation and extensive quarantine procedures. The last thing humanity needed was to accidentally start a plague on their first diplomatic mission. Kyle added that the ship itself would need modifications to appear less aggressive while maintaining its structural integrity and life support systems. The Spirit of Earth departed from lunar orbit 3 days later on a Thursday morning. The ship was not designed for combat, just a diplomatic vessel that had been converted from a deep space exploration craft. It had comfortable quarters for 30 people, meeting rooms, laboratories, and enough supplies for a 3-month journey. The hull was made of titanium alloy designed to withstand impacts from space debris traveling at high speeds. The engines were efficient and powerful, capable of reaching 0.8 light speed using the newly developed jump drive technology. By human standards, it was a modest ship meant for peaceful purposes. Jake stood on the bridge as they cleared Earth's orbit and set course for the rendezvous coordinates. He recorded a formal message for the Galactic Council, introducing himself and expressing humanity's gratitude for the invitation. He spoke about Earth's desire for peaceful relations and their excitement about learning from older civilizations. His words were sincere and carefully chosen. What he did not mention were the details that might worry the Council: that every crew member had military training, that the ship's hull could withstand weapons fire if necessary, or that their definition of unarmed still included defensive systems and personal protection equipment. The journey took 2 weeks of travel through empty space. During that time, Jake held daily meetings with his team to prepare for every possible scenario. Lisa studied everything they knew about the Council species, learning their customs and trying to understand their psychology. Ben reviewed security protocols and escape routes. Amy prepared medical equipment for various atmosphere types and potential biological incompatibilities. Kyle made sure every system on the ship was running perfectly. The entire crew trained in diplomatic procedures, learning how to be respectful and non-threatening while representing their entire species. On the 14th day, station harmony appeared on their sensors. It was beautiful in a way that took their breath away. The station was built from crystalline structures and organic-looking materials that seemed to grow rather than be constructed. It rotated slowly to create artificial gravity, though their readings showed it was only about 1/3 of Earth's gravity. Delicate towers and flowing architecture caught the light from nearby stars, making the entire structure glow with soft colors. It looked more like a work of art than a space station, nothing like the utilitarian metal constructions humans built. Jake ordered the approach to be slow and careful. He did not want their first impression to be one of aggression or carelessness. The spirit of Earth moved toward the docking port at minimal speed, its engines barely whispering. Even so, when the docking clamps engaged, the sound echoed through the station's corridors like a small explosion. The hydraulic systems hissed as the airlock sealed together, and the heavy thud of metal connecting to metal reverberated through the deck plating. To the aliens waiting inside, it must have sounded like a collision. Jake stood in the airlock with his senior officers all wearing their dress uniforms. They had left the environmental suits behind after confirming the atmosphere was breathable, though they all carried small breathers just in case. The uniforms were dark blue with medals and rank insignia, formal and respectful by human standards. Jake took a deep breath and nodded to Ben, who opened the airlock door. Bright light flooded in from the station, and they stepped through into a new chapter of human history, completely unaware that they were about to terrify every species they met, simply by being themselves. The first alien to see the humans up close was Ambassador Trell of the Zenthari delegation. He had positioned himself near the docking bay observation window, curious to see these newcomers from Earth. When the airlock opened and the humans stepped out, Trell's breathing apparatus began pulsing rapidly in what his species recognized as extreme distress. The humans were enormous compared to every species he had ever encountered. Even their smallest member, Commander Lisa Bennett, stood taller than the largest Krell diplomat. They moved with a fluid grace that reminded Trell of the hunting videos he had seen in xenobiology classes, the kind of movement that prey species instinctively feared. Jake Morrison led his team down the corridor toward the reception area where the council members had gathered. His boots made solid sounds against the deck plating with each step, sounds that carried through the station in ways that made security personnel reach for their communicators. The humans walked upright with perfect balance despite the lower gravity, their forward-facing eyes scanning everything around them with the kind of focus that predators used when assessing territory. When Jake smiled at the assembled aliens in what he thought was a friendly greeting, several of them stepped backward involuntarily. The smile was the problem. Human smiles showed teeth, and human teeth told a story that every species in the council could read instinctively: flat incisors in front for cutting, pronounced canines for tearing, and molars in back for grinding. It was the dental structure of an omnivore that ate meat, lots of meat. The fact that humans smiled to show friendliness, using the same gesture that many species used as a threat display, made the situation even more unsettling for the watching aliens. Jake stopped at a respectful distance and spoke in a deep voice that vibrated through the floor. He introduced himself and his crew, expressing gratitude for the invitation and honor at being chosen to represent Earth. His words were polite and carefully rehearsed, but the translator systems struggled with the underlying tones. Human language had evolved from sounds used in pack hunting, from commands shouted across battlefields, and from calls meant to carry over long distances. Even their most peaceful words carried an edge of aggression that made the council members uncomfortable. Council Leader Vess of the Krell stepped forward to greet them. Her crystalline body refracted light in beautiful patterns as she moved slowly across the floor. She welcomed the humans formally, though her voice carried uncertainty that the translators picked up clearly. She had been prepared to meet representatives from a new species, but the reality of humans was far more intimidating than the data had suggested. When she tried to comment on their ship, she struggled to find diplomatic words for what she really meant. It was huge and powerful and frightening. Jake tried to explain that the Spirit of Earth was actually one of their smaller diplomatic vessels, meant to be modest and non-threatening. He genuinely believed this because compared to human colony ships or military carriers, it was quite small. What he did not realize was that his modest ship had 3 times the mass of the largest council vessel currently docked at the station. Its hull could withstand impacts that would shatter any ship the council had ever built. Its engines generated more power than some council species used for their entire planetary infrastructure. Lisa stepped forward to present gifts from Earth, hoping to ease the tension she was starting to sense in the room. Kyle and 2 other crew members brought forward cases containing carefully chosen items meant to represent human culture. When they opened the cases, several council members moved backward instinctively. The gifts included a preserved rose, crystallized sugar, woven silk, and a small marble sculpture. To humans, these were beautiful examples of art and culture. To the council, each gift revealed something terrifying about humanity. The rose made the Xanthari delegates exchange worried glances. It was a plant with thorns, sharp defensive structures designed to prevent consumption by herbivores. The fact that humans found such an aggressive plant beautiful and associated it with love said something disturbing about their psychology. The sugar crystals were harmless enough until Lisa explained that humans consumed them regularly for enjoyment, revealing that they had such efficient metabolisms that they could process pure energy sources as casual treats. The silk was perhaps the most unsettling gift. Lisa explained cheerfully that it was produced by domesticated insects, specifically silkworms that humans had been breeding for thousands of years. The concept of domestication was not unknown to the council, but the scale and casualness with which Lisa described it made them realize that humans had been controlling other species for their entire recorded history. They bred animals for food, labor, companionship, and resources as if it was the most natural thing in the world. The marble sculpture completed the picture. Amy explained that it had been carved by hand from metamorphic rock, stone that had been transformed by heat and pressure deep in Earth's crust. The Krell delegates quietly analyzed the material and realized that it would require industrial equipment for most species to shape. Humans did it with simple tools and called it art. Their hands were strong enough, their patience long enough, and their determination sufficient to literally reshape stone for aesthetic purposes. Ambassador. Trell's breathing apparatus was pulsing at maximum rate as he asked about the domestication of other creatures. Lisa responded enthusiastically, not noticing his distress. She pulled up holographic images showing golden retrievers playing with children, horses being ridden across fields, and farms with hundreds of cattle. She explained that humans had been doing this for thousands of years, that some animals were companions while others provided food or labor. She thought she was sharing something heartwarming about human culture. The council members saw something completely different. They saw a species that casually enslaved other creatures, that bred them for specific purposes, that kept some as pets for emotional comfort, while eating others for sustenance. The image of a small human child playing with a large dog was particularly disturbing because it showed that humans trusted their children around animals that could easily harm them, suggesting either incredible confidence or unsettling familiarity with danger. Bex of the Voshin pack whispered to his packmates in their own language, words that the translators did not share with the humans. He pointed out that the dog in the image had teeth similar to human teeth, canines meant for tearing meat, yet the humans let it near their young. This meant either the humans had somehow reprogrammed the dog's predatory instincts entirely, or they were confident they could stop it if necessary. Both possibilities were equally frightening to species that had never domesticated anything more aggressive than small insect equivalents. Jake noticed the growing tension in the room and tried to redirect the conversation. He suggested moving to the conference chamber, where they could discuss matters more comfortably. The council members agreed quickly, eager to leave the docking area and compose themselves. As the humans followed their escort through the station's corridors, they failed to notice how other species moved out of their way, how shop owners closed their stalls as the humans passed, and how security officers shadowed their every movement with increasing nervousness. The humans walked calmly and confidently through station harmony, completely unaware that they had just presented themselves as the most dangerous species the Galactic Council had ever encountered. They thought the meeting was going well, that they had made a good first impression with their gifts and polite conversation. They had no idea that every council member was already composing emergency reports and discussing whether Earth should be quarantined immediately for the safety of the entire galaxy. The conference chamber had been designed over several months to accommodate every known species in the galaxy. The architects had carefully planned adjustable gravity zones, customizable atmospheric sections, and elegant seating that could support various body types. They had anticipated every possible need except one: humans. When Jake and his delegation entered the room, they immediately faced a problem that none of them had expected. The chairs looked beautiful, delicate crystalline structures that seemed to float above the floor, but they were clearly designed for species much lighter than humans. Lisa was the smallest member of the delegation at 130 pounds, and even she could tell that sitting on one of those chairs would shatter it instantly. Jake quietly asked Lisa if they had brought any backup equipment. She nodded and signaled to Kyle, who had anticipated this exact problem. He brought in folding metal chairs from the ship, simple field equipment that humans used for outdoor activities or temporary situations. The chairs were nothing special by human standards, just aluminum frames with canvas seats that could support up to 300 pounds each. When Kyle unfolded them, the sound echoed through the chamber like gunshots. The metal clicking into place was so loud that several council members flinched visibly. Jake sat down carefully, trying to make himself appear as non-threatening as possible. At 6 feet 2 inches tall and 210 pounds of muscle developed under Earth's gravity, he failed completely. His very presence seemed to fill the space around him. He apologized for bringing their own chairs, and explained politely that they were concerned about damaging the beautiful furniture. Council leader. Vess seemed confused by this explanation, until Ben Hayes clarified that humans were much heavier than the council had probably anticipated, because of Earth's higher gravity. This was putting it mildly. The average human weighed as much as 4 Xanthari or 3 Voshan combined. Their bone density alone was higher than most species' entire skeletal structure. Their muscles were packed with fibers designed to move mass against gravity that would crush most council species. Even their blood was thicker, carrying more oxygen to fuel bodies that operated at what other species would consider extreme performance levels. Constantly, the formal meeting began with each council member introducing their species and talking about their contributions to galactic peace. The Xanthari spoke about their artistic achievements and poetry. The Krell discussed their scientific discoveries and mathematical theories. The Voshan described their social harmony and collective decision-making. Each presentation emphasized cooperation, gentleness, and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. Then it was humanity's turn, and Jake stood up to speak. The simple act of standing created an unconscious reaction in every alien present. They all leaned back slightly, an instinctive response to a potential threat rising above them. Jake did not notice this as he began his prepared remarks. He spoke about Earth and its challenges, trying to show that humans were survivors who had learned valuable lessons. He described extreme temperature changes that swung from 50 degrees below zero to 50 degrees above. He talked about weather patterns that could generate winds strong enough to destroy buildings. He mentioned ice ages that had nearly wiped out early human populations and diseases that had killed millions. What Jake meant to convey was that humans were resilient and adaptable. What the council heard was that humans came from a planet that actively tried to kill them on a regular basis, and they had survived anyway. To species that evolved on stable, peaceful worlds with gentle climates and predictable seasons, Earth sounded like a prison planet designed to breed the ultimate predator. The fact that humans had not just survived but thrived in such conditions was terrifying. Lisa continued the presentation by showing holographic images of Earth. She thought she was sharing the beauty of their homeworld, and in many ways she was. The images showed vast oceans, towering mountains, dense forests, and sprawling cities. But she also included wildlife to demonstrate Earth's biodiversity. The hologram displayed a great white shark breaching the water with rows of razor-sharp teeth visible. Then a grizzly bear standing on its hind legs, towering over 8 feet tall with claws like knives. Finally, a pack of wolves surrounding prey in deep snow, working together with obvious intelligence and coordination. Ambassador Trell's breathing apparatus stuttered as he asked if these creatures actually lived on Earth right now. Lisa confirmed that they did, explaining that humans had mostly pushed them into protected wilderness areas, but that they still existed in significant numbers. She mentioned casually that just last month, a mountain lion had wandered into a suburban neighborhood near Los Angeles. She added that nobody was hurt, as if this was somehow reassuring. To the council members, the idea that humans shared their planet with multiple species of large predators and considered it a minor inconvenience was incomprehensible. Ben took over the next section, displaying human history on the holographic projector. He focused on what he thought were positive developments: the formation of the United Nations, various peace treaties, and international cooperation agreements. But to provide context, he also mentioned the conflicts that had led to these achievements. He talked about 2 world wars in the 20th century, about nuclear weapons that could destroy entire cities, and about several moments in history when humanity had come close to making their planet uninhabitable. He explained that humans had learned from these mistakes and developed systems to prevent such disasters in the future. The council members sat in stunned silence as they processed this information. Ben thought he was telling a story of growth and maturity, showing how humans had overcome their violent past. What the council heard was that humans had developed weapons capable of planetary destruction within a few centuries of discovering electricity, had seriously considered using them in warfare, and thought the fact that they had chosen not to was evidence of their peaceful nature. To species that had never experienced war on such a scale, this was like listening to someone describe barely restraining themselves from mass murder and expecting praise for their self-control. Kyle noticed the uncomfortable atmosphere and tried to lighten the mood by offering refreshments. He poured coffee from a thermal container, and the smell immediately filled the conference chamber. The dark liquid steamed in the cool air, releasing aromatic compounds that hit the council members' sensory organs with surprising intensity. Vex asked nervously what the beverage was, and Kyle explained cheerfully that it was coffee, a drink made from roasted plant seeds that contained a stimulant called caffeine. He added that humans drank it every day, often several times a day, to help them stay alert and focused. The council members exchanged alarmed glances. Humans regularly consumed a neurological stimulant for recreational purposes. They put psychoactive chemicals into their bodies daily and considered it completely normal. Ben made it worse by mentioning that he personally needed at least 2 cups before he was fully awake in the morning, as if admitting to chemical dependency was something casual and acceptable. The fact that humans had apparently evolved to tolerate and even require such substances just to function normally added another layer of concern to the council's growing list of worries about this species. Then Kyle offered chocolate. He broke off pieces from a dark chocolate bar and offered them around the table. When the Krell delegate analyzed the chemical composition, their crystalline structure flickered with distress. The chocolate contained theobromine, a compound that was toxic to most carbon-based life forms in the galaxy. Kyle ate a piece casually and commented that dark chocolate was his favorite, especially the varieties with high cacao content. The humans consumed poison for pleasure and had apparently done so for thousands of years. Amy tried to help by explaining that chocolate came from cacao plants and had been cultivated by human civilizations for millennia. She mentioned that ancient cultures had considered it valuable enough to use as currency. What she did not realize was that this made things worse. Humans had built entire economies around a toxic substance that they enjoyed consuming. They had domesticated yet another species, this time specifically to produce something that would kill most other intelligent beings, but gave humans pleasure. The presentation continued for another hour, with each human attempt at building rapport accidentally revealing something new and disturbing about their species. Lisa mentioned that humans enjoyed swimming in oceans that contained sharks and other dangerous predators. Ben talked about mountain climbing as a recreational activity, describing how humans deliberately put themselves in life-threatening situations for enjoyment. Amy discussed extreme sports like skydiving and rock climbing. Kyle showed pictures of spicy foods and explained that humans ate peppers containing capsaicin, a chemical that plants had evolved specifically as a defense mechanism to prevent consumption. By the time Jake suggested they break for the evening, every council member was mentally drafting emergency reports to their home governments. The humans had presented themselves as friendly and peaceful, and their intentions seemed genuine. But everything about them, from their biology to their culture to their casual attitude toward danger, marked them as. The next morning began with an incident that would become legendary in galactic diplomatic history. Lieutenant Ben Hayes woke up early as he always did, put on his exercise clothes, and decided to go for a run. Station Harmony had a public promenade that circled the outer ring, a peaceful walking path where council species would stroll slowly while enjoying the view of stars through the transparent sections. Ben thought it would be perfect for his morning 5-mile run. He started at a comfortable pace, his feet hitting the deck plating with rhythmic thuds that echoed through the corridors. His breathing was steady and controlled, the sound of air moving rapidly through human lungs designed for high-performance activity. Sweat began to form on his skin within minutes, his body's cooling system activating automatically. To Ben, this was a normal morning routine that he had done thousands of times. To the aliens on the promenade, it looked like a predator had escaped and was hunting through the station. Shop owners scrambled to close their stalls as Ben ran past. Families grabbed their young and moved quickly into side corridors. A Krell elder who was meditating near a viewing window activated an emergency beacon, certain that something dangerous was loose on the station. Security officers converged on the promenade from 3 directions, expecting to find a crisis situation. Instead, they found Ben Hayes stretching against a railing, cooling down after his run, completely unaware of the panic he had caused. A Xanthari security officer named Plix approached cautiously, his weapon drawn but pointed at the floor. He asked through his translator what Ben was doing. Ben smiled and explained that he had been exercising, that he tried to run at least 5 miles every day to stay in shape. He asked if there was a gym on the station where he could do some weight training later. Plix's translator struggled with the concept of deliberately running when not being chased, of pushing one's body to exhaustion as a daily practice, of lifting heavy objects for no productive purpose. To most council species, exercise meant gentle activities or light games. The idea of systematic physical stress as routine maintenance was completely foreign. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, Dr. Amy Sullivan was having an equally revealing conversation with the station's chief medical officer, a Krell named Christine. Amy had brought her standard medical supplies to show what human medicine looked like, thinking it would be a good way to establish medical cooperation protocols. She laid out bottles of common medications on the examination table: ibuprofen for pain and inflammation, amoxicillin for bacterial infections, diphenhydramine for allergic reactions, and acetaminophen for fever reduction. Christine analyzed the chemical compositions and her crystalline body flickered rapidly in distress. The ibuprofen worked by inhibiting prostaglandin synthesis, a process that would be fatal to most council species. Amy explained that humans gave it to children for fevers and that it was available in stores without needing a doctor's prescription. Christine could barely process this information. A compound that would constitute chemical warfare by galactic standards was something humans gave to their offspring casually. The antibiotics were even more alarming. Christine pointed out that amoxicillin destroyed bacterial cell walls and that the dosages Amy described would kill most known species. Amy nodded and said it was just a standard prescription for a respiratory infection, maybe 10 days of treatment. She added that antibiotic resistance was becoming a problem on Earth because humans had used these compounds so extensively. Christine realized with growing horror that humans had not only weaponized chemicals against microscopic life, but had done so with such intensity that the microorganisms were evolving defenses. Earth was apparently locked in an ongoing biological arms race at the cellular level. Back in the conference chamber, the afternoon session was supposed to be a cultural exchange. The council members went first, presenting examples of their art, music, and literature. The Xanthari showed flowing poetry about harmony with nature. The Krell displayed mathematical proofs that they considered beautiful. The Voshan performed a gentle group song about cooperation and unity. Everything was calm, peaceful, and designed to showcase civilized sophistication. Then Kyle Rogers stood up to present human music. He started with what he thought was safe, classical music from Earth's past. He played Beethoven's Ninth Symphony through the chamber's audio system. The council found it chaotic and overwhelming, with dramatic shifts in volume and intensity that made them uncomfortable. The crescendos felt like auditory attacks, but they tolerated it politely, assuming this was an older, more primitive form of human art. Kyle then played what he considered normal music, a popular rock song from the 21st century. The opening guitar riff hit the chamber like a physical force, The driving drums pounded through the floor. The electric instruments created sounds that most council species had never heard before. The vocals were powerful and raw, expressing emotions with an intensity that seemed almost violent. Several council members covered their auditory organs. Vex and his packmates huddled together, their instincts telling them they were hearing a threat display. Kyle noticed their distress and quickly lowered the volume, apologizing. He explained that music was incredibly important in human culture, that people listened to it for hours every day, that it affected moods and brought communities together. He mentioned that music festivals on Earth could draw hundreds of thousands of people who would gather to experience these sounds together. The council members tried to understand how beings could willingly expose themselves to such aggressive stimulation, not just occasionally, but as a regular part of daily life. Lisa took over the presentation with human literature. She had carefully selected works that she thought demonstrated universal themes of love, courage, and growth. She started with Romeo and Juliet, explaining that it was a beautiful love story that had been popular for over 500 years. She summarized the plot. Two young people from families that hated each other fell in love, tried to be together despite opposition, and ultimately died. But their deaths brought peace between the families. Ambassador Trell interrupted, his breathing apparatus pulsing rapidly. He asked for clarification about whether the protagonists actually died at the end. Lisa confirmed that they did, that their deaths were tragic but meaningful. She seemed confused about why this was concerning. The council members looked at each other with growing understanding of human psychology. Humans considered death to be romantic. They told stories where the heroes died and called it a love story. They found beauty in tragedy and meaning in sacrifice. Lisa continued with other examples from human literature. She described the Odyssey, an ancient story about war and adventure. She talked about Moby Dick, where a man spent years hunting a whale that had injured him. She mentioned The Old Man and the Sea, celebrating a fisherman's struggle against a fish too large for him to catch. Every story she chose revealed the same pattern. Humans celebrated conflict, found beauty in struggle, and honored individuals who pursued goals even when it led to their destruction. Ben tried to help by explaining that these were just stories, that they were not meant to be taken literally. But this made things worse. If humans told these stories for entertainment, it meant they found such violence and tragedy enjoyable. They sought out narratives of conflict and suffering during their leisure time. Their idea of relaxation included consuming stories about war, revenge, and death. The presentation went on for another hour, with each example of human culture, accidentally revealing how fundamentally different humans were from every other species in the council. When Jake finally suggested they move on to practical discussions about integration, the atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. The council members were no longer curious about humanity. They were genuinely frightened. Council leader Vess carefully brought up the standard integration proposal. She explained that new species typically received a mentor from an established council member, gained access to basic technologies, and slowly integrated into trade networks and cultural exchanges. She added that there would be some restrictions at first. No military vessels leaving their home system, no colonization beyond designated space, and regular inspections to ensure compliance with galactic law. She presented this as normal procedure, the same process every species went through. The conference room went completely silent. The humans looked at each other, and the council members saw something new in their expressions. The friendliness was still there, but underneath it was something harder and more dangerous. Jake's voice was quiet when he spoke, asking for clarification about restrictions and inspections. The politeness remained, but there was an edge to it that had not been there before. Vess tried to explain that the restrictions were standard practice, that they typically lasted 50 to 100 years, sometimes longer. She emphasized that this was for everyone's benefit, to ensure stability and peaceful integration. Ben leaned forward and asked directly how long these restrictions would last. When Trell answered that it could be a century or more, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lisa stood up slowly, her small frame somehow seeming much larger than before. She spoke calmly but firmly, explaining that humanity had existed for hundreds of thousands. The humans stood together as one unified group, and the council members finally understood what they were seeing. These were not desperate newcomers begging for acceptance into galactic society. These were proud representatives of a species that had conquered their own planet and were now ready to claim their place among the stars. Jake told the council they would give them time to reconsider the proposal, that the spirit of Earth was scheduled to depart in 3 days, and that he hoped to hear a better offer before then. The humans filed out of the conference chamber without another word, leaving the council sitting in shocked silence. The emergency session began within an hour of the humans leaving. Every council member had brought additional advisors, and the chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species. Ambassador Trell spoke first, arguing passionately that humans were too dangerous to integrate. He pointed out their predatory biology, their violent history, and their disturbing culture. He showed recordings of Ben Hayes running through the station like a hunting animal. He displayed analysis of human medicines that could kill most council species. He played samples of their aggressive music and summarized their violent literature. Christine countered his arguments with observations of her own. She pointed out that humans had the capacity for tremendous violence, but had chosen not to use it. They had developed weapons that could destroy their entire planet, but had pulled back from using them at the last moment. They had fought wars that should have extinguished their species but had survived and learned. Their history was violent, but it was also a history of choosing peace despite having every ability to choose war. Vex spoke for his pack, and his words carried weight because the Voshan were known for their ability to read predator behavior. He explained that he had watched the humans carefully during all their interactions. They moved like hunters, but they were not hunting. They had biological weapons in the form of strength and teeth, but they kept them carefully controlled. They had shown the council their capacity for violence through stories in history, but they had also shown that they had deliberately chosen a different path. The humans were not pretending to be peaceful while hiding aggression. They were genuinely trying to be peaceful while being honest about their nature. Another delegate insisted it was a deception, that the humans were manipulating the council by appearing friendly while concealing their true intentions. Council leader Vess listened to all the arguments before speaking. She said quietly that she did not believe the humans were deceiving anyone. She thought they were genuinely attempting to present themselves in the best possible light, trying to be friendly and cooperative. That was exactly what made them so frightening. This was humanity on their best behavior, actively trying not to be threatening, and they were still the most intimidating species the galaxy had ever encountered. She pulled up all the data they had collected on humanity and displayed it for everyone to see. Images of Earth with its extreme weather and dangerous wildlife. Records of human history with its wars and near extinctions. Examples of their music, literature, and art that celebrated struggle and conflict. Medical analysis showing their incredible durability and tolerance for substances that were toxic to other species. Every piece of information painted the same picture. Humans were survivors who had been shaped by a hostile world into something unprecedented in galactic civilization. Trell demanded to know what they should do. The original proposal for restrictions had been designed to protect the galaxy from potentially destabilizing species. The humans had rejected it completely, and they had done so with a confidence that suggested they meant every word. Vess was quiet for a long time before she finally spoke again. She asked a question that changed the entire direction of the conversation. What if they had been approaching this problem incorrectly from the beginning? What if the real question was not whether humanity could fit into their civilization, but whether their civilization was ready for humanity? The council members stirred uncomfortably as Vess continued. She pointed out that their galaxy had been at peace for thousands of years, but it was a fragile peace that only existed because all their species were fundamentally similar. They were all prey species, or at least non-aggressive beings. They had never had to face a real threat because nothing in their civilization had the capacity to be dangerous. Their peace existed in a protected bubble that had never been tested by contact with something truly different. She brought up a star map showing unexplored regions of space. The council knew there were other civilizations out there because they had detected signals and found ruins of extinct species. Some of those civilizations might not be peaceful. Some might be aggressive, might see the council's resources and territory as things to be conquered rather than shared. Vess asked what would happen when they eventually encountered a species that was hostile, that had evolved as predators and chosen conquest over cooperation. Trell started to say they would negotiate, but his voice trailed off because he knew the answer. Species that evolved to negotiate did not become conquerors. Vess pressed her point. If they ever faced a truly aggressive species, they would be completely defenseless. But humans knew how to be predators. They had evolved on a world that tried to kill them constantly. They had fought wars that would have destroyed any council species. And then they had chosen to be better than their nature demanded. They had the capacity for violence that the council lacked, but they also had the wisdom and moral structure to control it. They were exactly what the council needed, not as subordinates but as partners. Vex understood what she was suggesting. She wanted to bring humans into the council not as junior members who needed supervision, but as equals who could teach the rest of the galaxy how to be strong. Vess confirmed this, saying they should offer humanity real partnership. Let Earth join as a full member with all rights and privileges. In return, ask them to share their knowledge of conflict, to help prepare the council for possibilities they had never faced. Teach defensive thinking without promoting aggression. Show them how to be strong not for conquest but for protection. The debate continued through the night and into the next day. Arguments were made from every perspective. Fears were voiced and hopes were expressed. Some council members remained convinced that humanity was too dangerous to trust. Others saw potential for something new and valuable. By the second morning, a narrow consensus had emerged. They would make a new offer, one that treated Earth as an equal rather than a problem to be managed. Jake was in the observation deck watching the binary stars when the message came. Vess appeared on his communicator and asked if he would be willing to hear a revised proposal. Jake said he was listening. Vess took a deep breath, an unnecessary action for her species but one she had learned from watching humans prepare to say something important. She told Jake that the council had made a mistake, that they had approached Earth as something to be controlled rather than a partner to be valued. She said they understood now that this was wrong. The Galactic Council formally invited Earth to join as a full member with complete rights and privileges. No restrictions beyond those applying to all members. No special inspections. No limitations on expansion or development. Jake felt relief but kept his expression neutral as he asked what had changed their minds. Vess said she would be honest with him because the humans had been honest with them. The Council was frightened of humanity. Human strength, aggression, and capacity for violence were unlike anything they had encountered, but they were also frightened of the universe beyond their borders. Vess explained that they had built peaceful civilization among peaceful species, but peace only worked when everyone chose it. Humans were proof that a species could choose peace even when fully capable of war. The Council needed that perspective. They needed someone who understood both peace and conflict, who could help them prepare for threats they had never had to face. She asked if Earth would help them learn to be strong not for aggression but for defense, to understand conflict so they could prevent it. Jake looked at his senior officers who had joined him at the console. He saw the same thought in all their eyes. This was more than they had hoped for. A chance not just to join but to shape the future of galactic civilization. Jake responded formally on behalf of Earth, accepting the proposal and saying it would be an honor to work with the Council as true partners. Vess replied that both species had much to learn from each other, though she warned it might take time for the Council to become comfortable with coffee and rock music. Jake laughed, a warm, genuine sound that no longer made the Council members afraid. He said they had plenty of time. 3 months later, the first joint training program began on Station Harmony. Ben Hayes taught basic defensive tactics to mixed classes of Council security personnel. He was patient and gentle by human standards, though the training was still intense for students who had never considered physical conflict. They persevered because they had seen what humans could do when trying to be frightening, and they had also seen what humans offered when they chose to be friends. The galaxy was changing in ways no one had predicted. Humanity had arrived not with weapons or threats, not with submission or